should we have gotten involved in World War II? When you have an expansionist power that is ethnically nationalistic, authoritarian, we did not know
Russia, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit extreme considering the Holocaust, but we didn't know the Holocaust was happening before we invaded. There was speculation, there were concerns, but that's not the reason for the U.S.'s intervention, and it wasn't until afterwards. But you basically had the collapse of Europe, the expansion, and don't forget, Nazi Germany was in North Africa. Not to mention the Italy, not to mention Japan. So this was a global war for which the U.S. largely stayed out of until the final few years. So even in the minds of the Americans, we should not be involved. It actually wasn't until we were attacked that we decided to actually get involved, which is interesting.
Do you think we should have gotten involved earlier?
Probably, well.
Do you think it would, let me ask it this way.
It's a coin
Do you think
toss.
it would be better for the U.S. and the world had we gotten involved in World War II earlier than we did?
No.
No, why not?
Because we don't know what would have happened had things played out differently. What we do know is the time frames by which we acted, we got a result that was largely beneficial until the prevailing powers created what's called the liberal economic order, which has created instability and chaos for generations, and the U.S. entering a bunch of wars they've never declared. The Constitution of the United States effectively ended in the 50s with these declarations of, say, the IMF, the World Bank, et cetera. So there's it's an interesting conversation that actually was lighting up with Douglas Murray and Dave Smith the other day. And it's been one of the principal discussions on foreign policy now. There's a lot of concern over the worldview of people like Daryl Cooper, as well as Dave Smith and others, who have made arguments that Winston Churchill was a bad guy, which I think is largely silly. I think the circumstances of World War II are the offshoot of World War I. World War I was high density nations in dispute for a variety of reasons, came to the industrialization of war, which then leads to the wars it was. It's easy to say now 100 years on nearly, I would have done it better. Honestly, I have no idea. So if you were to say, should we have gotten involved earlier? Well, I don't know, because the outcome could have been substantially worse. Sure. Right now, what we know is the Nazis were very bad. They were authoritarian. They controlled their economy. They functioned not too dissimilar. The difference between the communists and the fascists and the Nazis was largely on their view of culture, traditionalism, and progressivism. So we don't want an expansionist, authoritarian system that takes everything over.
I agree that we don't want.
But the liberal economic order has functioned largely like that, only slightly better in some respects.
I fundamentally disagree with that view. I think the liberal world order has made people more safe, more wealthy, and much better off than it was before. But that's another argument. We're talking about Ukraine, Russia today, and I want to, because you said something there that I do think is interesting, like that we don't want authoritarian expansionist powers. And I would argue
like
that
NATO.
we should have. NATO, again, there's a difference between expanding at the point of a gun like Russia does, and there's a difference between expanding, say, hey, you want to join NATO? And there's like, you know what? I would like to join NATO.
If that's what had happened. But if you look at the history of Ukraine, that's literally not what happened.
Ukraine isn't joining NATO. It hasn't joined NATO. It wasn't even discussions to join NATO. It got nixed, right? It is now because of Russia's actions, but it's probably not going to happen.
And the conflict is largely predicated upon NATO
but again,
policies.
Once again, you have said that, like, oh, it happens in the case of NATO that is just the same as Russia doing the guns. But no, NATO has largely expanded through voluntary joining. This has happened. Can you give me a country that you think that has joined NATO under coercion?
Right now in Romania, they've removed the populist right-wing candidate from being able to run for no reason. In France, Marine Le Pen has been accused of
What
money
does that
laundering.
have to do with joining NATO?
How is
Romania
it?
has Romania.
How
has
can
been
I
enforcing
determine
NATO.
whether or not the population of a country is willfully joining a nation when they remove its leaders?
Okay,
So
when
if
do you
Russia,
think that
if Russia
France
ousts,
joined NATO,
They removed Ukraine's leader.
if USAID funds protests in
Again,
Ukraine,
Ukraine isn't joining NATO.
So-
Hold on. The few days before the invasion, a demand was said, "Don't you promise never join NATO?" Why didn't they just say, "Yeah, sure, we'll never join NATO. NATO will never
Because
accept them"?
a country has a right to make its own choices.
You said they're not joining NATO, so if they're not joining it, why not they just say, "Yeah, we're never going to join"?
Because you don't let a foreign power come in and tell you what you can and cannot do. You say, if we're going to exist as a country, we have to be at least somewhat independent and be able to make our own decisions. They don't want to be a puppet of Russia.
Okay, so they were never going to join it.
But I still want an answer.
They were never going to
just
join
real quick,
it.
I still want to answer from you, Tim.
On what?
Which NATO country has joined through coercion?
So my point is, I cannot assess which country is joining free of their free will when we know in these countries they forcefully remove opposition to NATO? When a president starts to rise up, say Marine Le Pen, and she says we want to leave the European Union, so they accuse her of crimes, criminally charge her, and remove her.
Did she do those crimes?
We don't know, and probably not. The argument
That's why they hold a trial to be able to find out. But
hold on. You're right. You're right. He's completely correct. He's completely correct. You are completely correct. Crimea separated from Ukraine by a vote that was completely legitimate, and we all agree.
Of course, except for, again,
except
in
that
UN
one.
Resolution 68, they disagreed because there was evidence that it was under coercion.
So the
if you
people
have
who are
evidence,
so the people
that
who are
Mary
largely on the
Le
side
Pen
of
was
opposing
being
Russia.
set up.
So the people who oppose Russia have argued that the election that happened in Crimea is invalid. My point is, you have chosen to respect only certain administrative procedures and not others.
Absolutely.
My position is neutral. We know that they've criminally charged Marine Le Pen. We don't know if it's true or not. If
it is true, should they charge her?
If Marine Le Pen committed a crime, should she be charged?
Yes.
It's a question. Yes.
Should she be removed?
No.
No, why not? Why do you think? Well,
because
I guess it
democratic
depends on the crime, right?
countries allow for people to vote. So previously in France, when other
Do you
politicians
think felons should be able to vote? Like convicted
Yes.
people sitting in prison right now should be
not
able to
in prison.
Not in prison.
There's due process restrictions, but once you get out, your rights should be respected.
If her criminal conviction involved jail time, and I'm not sure it does because I'm not quite up on that case specifically, let's say 5 years in jail. Do you think she should be able to run from a jail cell? Interesting.
Yes, because in a democratic institution, a democratic country, the people decide. You can't simply have a judge bang a gavel and say the people no longer have a right to vote.
I can't decide to take away your guns. I can't vote on that. I can't decide to stop you from speaking, to deplatform you. I can't vote on that. And we understand that. We understand that because we have a constitution that protects this. We understand that in a democracy, there are certain things.
That's not correct.
Wait, hold on. Do we care about constitutional rules now? Just want to ask. Like, do we care about constitutional processes?
Principles.
Do we care about constitutional
principles? We care
principles?
about principles. And sometimes principles comes into conflict, and you have to decide the higher principle.
Right.
And when you have a principle of sovereign territories should not be invaded militarily with lethal force by foreign powers to stop them from resolving their internecine conflicts, I think that does rise above some legalese in a constitution. I think that's fundamentally a different thing.
I have a question.
I think your position here really, it's very convenient, right? Because
it's very convenient because it's very correct.
No, it's very convenient because, if the people there, if they're powerless to stop their oppression, and now your position is, well, other countries, they can't go in and help the oppressed, well, that's very convenient, right? Now they have to stay oppressed because, hey, other countries can't go in. You'd be against the French sending Lafayette to help us in our revolution against the British. You'd be against the U.S. getting involved in Afghanistan for moral reasons, and Iraq and Libya and Syria. You're just like you're an anti-interventionalist across the board, surely.
Of course not. And I've already recognized that there are severe, extreme circumstances where, yes, intervention. You probably should do that.
Should we have?
I gave you an example in the 90s when we invaded the Balkans, right? And NATO did all that and stopped the Serbians from genocide all these people. That was good.
Should we have invaded Iraq?
Ooh, that's a good question. Which time? Gulf War?
Either.
Gulf War, yes. The other time, probably in hindsight, no. But
why did we invade Iraq in the Gulf War?
Because they were taking over Kuwait, which was a sovereign country, which was pleading for our help, and which was our ally.
And then what about the second time?
The second time, it was because we were sold a lie that there was weapons of mass destruction. Had there actually been weapons of mass destruction, there might have been a case there. And had we actually believed there were weapons of mass destruction, then fair enough. But
should we have intervened
I think in
Libya?
hindsight, it was a mistake.
Should we have intervened in Libya?
I'm not familiar enough about Libya to make a decision on that, unfortunately.
The actions of NATO resulted in the death of Muammar Gaddafi, which resulted in the reignition of the North African slave trade and tribal warfare. And the country's in relative chaos right now. I'm wondering for what reason NATO got involved in Libya. Why did we do this?
I don't know enough about Libya to say. I'm just going to.
It sounds to me like a dominant international power intervened in a local nation's conflict and overthrew their government.
In certain cases, if you're asking me that if everything America and NATO has done has been wise or correct, I would say no. There are obviously instances where I think we should not have gone in. Vietnam is a good one, right?
Should we be involved in Syria?
Now?
Ever.
There's a Yes, I think we have interest in overthrowing a monster like Assad. Yes, because he destabilized his people, and I think
How did he do that?
Again, by severely oppressing the people who would rise against him.
What does that mean?
Chemical weapon attacks, mass graves. Again, look at what happened after Syria, right? After the rebels took back Syria, right? And what they found, again, I'm not for that. That's bad, right? But they found that doesn't make Assad good. That doesn't make Assad better even, because again, the prisons found in Syria where they had people who hadn't seen daylight in years, just mass prisons, was horrific. Again, I am not saying that every intervention is good.
Does the U.S. do that with prisons?
To the extent that
people are in solitary
Syria did,
confinement.
No.
People are in solitary confinement for extended periods, maybe years, for instance, without trial.
Is incomparable to what Syria does.
What does Syria do?
Syria has mass prisons that they throw people in for simply opposing the government, for simply just...
What does that mean, opposing the government?
Does Ukraine arrest people and imprison them for opposing the government?
Yes. Yeah. But do you think these are the... Look, this idea, okay, and these comparisons you guys are trying to draw here
directly
between Syria and USA, right? Syria and Ukraine are insane to me. I think
that's not an argument. That's not an argument. Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.